Hello, this is Unsung with GameLeap, and today we're providing you with a tier list for patch 13.21. 13.21 has shaken up the jungle meta yet again, but there are some surprising new additions to top as well. It would seem that the meta is actually in a pretty decent spot for solo queue, and we have a broad champion diversity. As I'm sure that you know, Worlds being on has shown us that the season is almost over, so make sure that you pick up some of these champs to get LP while you still can. We'll primarily be focusing on the S+ tier champions today. Just to clarify, this tier list is the best for climbing from Iron to Diamond. If I were to rate these champions for their max potential in the hands of a professional, these lists would be a lot different. Our goal today is to give you the best condensed list to impact your games immediately, so you could still reach your goals while having fun. Let's go ahead and begin with top lane. Camille is still the #1 best top laner of the game due to the lower overall damage and higher time to kill. Last patch she was free to blind pick, but some of her counters, Tahm Kench and Singed, have received some buffs this patch, so she actually has a few more losing matchups. Watch out for Jax, Kench, Singed, and sometimes Mord if we're playing Camille, but do know that being even or slightly behind on this champion is winning. Camille is currently a must-have in your champion roster. I would recommend playing a few normals on her before you take her into rank. Just make sure that you go grasp into the harder lanes that are going to be trading with you often, such as Renekton, Fiora, and the like, and then go conquer into easier lanes, such as things like Malphite. Garen has had quite the explosive showing lately, even going as far as being picked in Worlds. He beats Cassante, Jax, Malphite, and most other juggernauts, making him a top tier counter pick, but a viable blind as well. The phase rush nerfs did hurt Garen just a bit, but his ease of use, overall strength, and matchup still put him into OP tier. Ban Camille and proxy against Kench or ranged matchups. Dodge Vayne if you want as much LP as you can get. This champion's very solid, and he's a great conduit for basically all the OP items at the moment. Just a reminder, if you want an in-depth guide to all mechanics, tips, and tricks for champions like Camille, head on over to GameLeap.com by clicking on the description box below. I've spent hundreds of hours crafting guides to help you climb rank after rank after rank. See you on the site. Fiora is our next OP pick. While being harder to play than most, her damage and scaling are busted as can be this patch. Percent max health true damage in a slower game is of course really strong, and Fiora split pushes like no other on top of that. Her matchups into Garen, Camille, Cassante, and tanks in general are good. Just make sure to run Grasp and don't be afraid to first item Sunder. Fiora in lane is quite simple to pilot. We simply use our Q in conjunction with Grasp, harass our opponent down, and make sure that we're constantly proccing vitals. Then after our first item, we can play a little bit more aggressively. Don't let her higher than average skill floor intimidate you. She's really quite simple once we play her this way. Aatrox is still a solid pick as always if we want to play more of a carry playstyle. Just make sure to rush Cleaver into tanky opponents and to go Gore into other bruisers. I would recommend banning Camille this patch if you don't know the matchup, as well as Fiora. These are both of Aatrox's hardest matchups when we don't understand them, and they can punish you like no other. Malphite is still amazing, but both Kench and Cassante ruin this champion, and their player at spiking this patch make him a bad blind pick. Sylas also exists, so as long as we don't have a Sylas on the enemy team and those two mentioned earlier aren't picked, then we're good to go. Now let's go ahead and talk about Cassante. This patch's win rate and play rate have absolutely skyrocketed. At the time of recording this video, he's been hotfix nerfed once, and his win rate is still sitting pretty high. Cassante received a rework on 13.20, and it's taken some time for people to relearn him. He's easier to play, less effective in teamfights at the highest level, and still dumpsters all the other tanks like before. The primary causes of Cassante's win rate shooting up so much this patch are people understanding his new playstyle, the changes to his passive, and the bug fixes to his R being so effective. The Q buff has been almost entirely reverted with minimal effects to his win rate, and even if the Dauntless Instinct buffs get rolled back next patch, I highly suspect that this champion will stabilize at about 50% win rate, but definitely still over 50. The bug fixes are just that effective at bringing up his win rate. If you're someone who's been playing Cassante for a while, he is without a doubt an OP tier, but I would not actually recommend investing the time into him. This champion is in an incredibly volatile state, going from the lowest win rate to the highest win rate chop overnight, dropping from 1st to 8th without any actual changes, and then dropping again to 17th after the hotfix nerf. He will be nerfed again next patch because Riot wants to keep him on the weaker side for both pro play and solo queue, so I cannot in good conscience tell you guys to main this champion knowing it will be gutted again in just a matter of days. If you want to learn him, then do it. Just know that what you learn will change again next patch. The bug fixes on this champion are simply too effective. Riot will have to remove either one of his mechanics or change something from the ground up in order to balance him. We'll leave Cassante in OP tier for now, but I highly suspect that this champion will receive some nerfs that will make him B or C tier very soon. So just keep that in mind. Tahm Kench is our honorable mention this patch. He was decent last patch, but the buffs to his passive make his one item spike really strong. He's weaker in the early game where you primarily want to be picking him, but after the buffs his mid game is really oppressive into most carries. We can rush Anathema's Chain on this champion and put it on our opponent, just trust me on this one. Make sure to take grasps as well. Finish your Heartsteel after chains and focus on winning front to back or shutting down carries after that. If you're struggling into Jax, Tahm Kench is also a fantastic counter pick. Jungle has received another meta shifting change. The pets now scale better with AP, and an AD scaling has been introduced to the pets. performance. As expected, the already dominant AD junglers have shot up to the top, but some new AP picks are also rising. Fiddle has been replaced as the best jungler in the game. All three of the next champions are very close in power level, so the ranking here doesn't matter as much as it did before. We'll be using the overall pick rate as our primary metric to grade these champions. Briar is now public enemy number 1. This champion has been absolutely disgusting since her introduction. Both the lethality and iron spike builds are incredibly effective at different things. A good rule of thumb for Briar is to treat her like Kayn, go bruiser into tanks and lethality into squishies. This is an ultra opportunistic champion with very minimal counter picks. I would recommend that we actually ban Briar if we're not playing it this patch. Graves was busted before the AD scaling was put on pets, but now he's somehow even stronger. There were no nerfs to him last patch despite him being an OP tier, so now he's just double dipping on pet damage harder than any other AD jungler. If you want a safe pick 99.9% of the time, go with Graves. He doesn't have many counters, snowballs really hard, and has some of the best general itemization in all of League. Ghostblade into Collector into Black Cleaver is hands down the way to go on this champion. Nocturne is going to be our final OP pick for the AD junglers. He's sleeper as ever this patch. Easy to pilot, effective in all elo brackets, fast farm clear compared to most other junglers, and he has good scaling. If you want to bully people in solo queue who overstay, or if your games aren't decided by the 5-minute mark, then you must pick this champion. We'll also throw out an honorable mention to J4. This champion can be in the OP tier if we understand his playstyle perfectly, but making a mistake on J4 in the current jungle meta sets him really far behind, especially against the carries that we listed now. Evelynn, Morgana, and Lilia are all around the same power level this patch. These are now the top 3 APs. All 3 of them are really strong, but their playstyles differ greatly. Eve excels at picking champions with her raw damage and assassinating targets. Lilia is primarily going to be a teamfighter and counter jungler, and Morgana is a beast for catching single opponents while having an okay mix of teamfighting there as well. Just know that currently, if you are picking an AP jungler, you are kind of nerfing yourself. The AD junglers this patch are simply too dominant, too effective at snowballing, and have too much impact to warrant you playing an AP unless you're picking Evelynn. This patch, I would recommend not playing engaged junglers aside from Maokai and J4. Please don't end yourself by playing Brand or Zyra as well. The other 3 AP champs are just miles ahead of them right now in terms of effectiveness and ease of use. Mid lane has seen some of the least amount of movement this patch. Orianna is still one of the best blind picks, but the jungle meta has really harmed her. Her lack of mobility in early game skirmishing hinder her more significantly now than before, so we're going to be removing her from the number 1 spot. Sylas is the clear best mid lane champion of the patch, offering unmatched early game pressure, good scaling, and immense skirmish damage. This champion is completely busted. You need to be playing him as much as you can before nerfs come his way, and they are coming. Go Crown into heavy melee damage and Everfrost into everything else. Kassadin is currently the highest win rate mid in the game, but I would not recommend blind picking him. If you do blind pick him, be very careful of Akshan, Tristana, and Neferi, but do know that this champion is hilariously OP when he's allowed to scale against a mage. This is another reason why Orianna gets knocked down a peg. Another great thing about Kassadin is that he actually does have a winning matchup into Sylas. Neferi is going to be our hidden OP pick of the patch. This champion is just really solid into pretty much every matchup. We can rush Hydra into heavy push or go Eclipse into Cleaver against champions that we can actually interact with. Make sure to run Domination second with Treasure Hunter and Eyeball Collection since your bonus AD scalings are so high. First Strike is going to be the keystone of choice on Neferi. Our final pick for OP tier is going to be Vex because she simply shuts down mobility so well. She doesn't have the best of matchups into Kassadin, but she can deal with him later on in the game. Sylas is a breeze for her to deal with. Neferi isn't that bad for Vex to deal with because she can simply just fear her away, and she does well into Orianna and the like. This champ is going to be super solid for forever. Her numbers are really high, and she's just a great blind pick. Bot lane is going to be the next role on our list. Vayne sits at our number 1 spot for 2 reasons. She does incredibly well into both Ezreal and Ziggs, scales pretty much every game due to the new pacing, and she can handle the other OP tops, mids, and junglers the best. If you want free elo on this patch, Vayne and our next pick are going to be your ticket. The Ziggs buffs were simply too much, whoever would have guessed. This champion is hilariously broken. He clears waves almost instantly, scales better than most AD carries, and punishes immobile champions like Ashe, Jinx, and Jhin. Blinding Ziggs will also set up our mid for a counter pick if we draft him earlier in rotation, giving us another chance at winning. Ideally, we want to play Ziggs as a solo AP if we can, but do know that as a blind pick in general, he is a strong champion. Magic penetration is one of the most valuable stats in all of League and is super effective, especially when we play a champion like Ziggs who has a low cooldown on his Q, so we can always go a Void Staff as our 3rd item if the enemy team is stacking MR. If we blind Ziggs, make sure that we do ban Vayne. Ezreal is still really good, but he really struggles against both Vayne and Ziggs. These champions simply outpace him if he doesn't snowball, knocking him down a few pegs. In order to actually snowball and kind of forgo these bad matchups, we can run Press the Attack and then focus on all-inning at level 2 once we have our passive fully stacked. This will make things easier for you, but it's definitely not a good solution. Both Trinity Force and Duskblade Ezreal are very strong. Make sure to play Duskblade into squishier teams and then go Trinity into a more balanced team composition. Jinx is still a solid champion, but her team reliance makes her a sitting duck against most of the meta mids and junglers. If you want to play what's best, I recommend replacing Jinx with Twitch, but she's an okay pick with the proper team composition. Reminder that all career ADCs are kind of struggling right now. ADC items are at an all-time low in terms of satisfaction, so it's just better to play something that either abuses Trinity Force like Vayne, Ashe, or Ezreal instead of a traditional career AD carry. That being said, said, Jinx with the proper team composition and when she's allowed to scale is one of the scariest champions in the game due to her resetting nature and simply how strong she can be with the proper team comp. Solo queue, however, has a nasty habit of making your team play against you, especially if we're playing AD carry and anything under diamond, so make sure that you keep that in mind. Support is the role with the least change by far this patch. Senna is still number 1, her damage, consistency, vision control, and scaling are simply unmatched. This champion will remain this way until the buffs get rolled back where itemization changes nerf her by proxy. Overall, I think that the support meta is in an awkward place right now, and that definitely does contribute as to why Senna is so strong. Supports are way more independent than they were before because we don't actually have to play around the AD carry as much, since getting a crit champion to 3 items isn't an automatic win anymore. Roaming is also a super important factor, which separates the OP tier champions away from the rest. Senna does have good roams as well. Rakan is still number 2, and Worlds is doing a good job in illustrating what makes him so strong. His post 6 engage is potent, he provides good utility for the team through shields and heals, and he can build the busted support items earlier than most other champions. Abuse Shurelya's, Zeke's, and Redemption on this champion and make sure to roam. Janna and Bard sit about the same strength for solo queue, but for different reasons. We want to play Janna for peel, scaling, and healing. She does pretty well into things like Nautilus and Rakan. If the enemy team drafts heavy engage, then Janna is always a safe bet. On the other hand, we want to play Bard for roaming, snowballing, and playmaking. This champ is really oppressive into enchanters and champs like Janna because his engage is non-committal, he can do it frequently from range, and his roaming is basically unmatched. Just make sure that we don't roam too much on this champion, as this will adversely affect our ADC. Blitz is still a solid pick overall, but we primarily want to be picking him into squishy enchanters and Senna. If we don't land the hook, this champion is just flat out worse than Rakan in every way, but the hook is of course one of the most game-changing abilities if we're able to hit it well. That being said, we definitely want to be banning Morgana this patch if we're a Blitz player, simply because of her flex between jungle and support being so strong on the current patch. Thresh is going to be our final pick for S tier. Just make sure that you take the Guardian setup that we mentioned in the previous video. This champion is really good at basically everything. He's a solid generalist. If we want to play him as more of a peel champion, we can do that. We can play him as pseudo engage, and we can also use him as a counter engage as well. Just remember that Thresh is going to be significantly harder to play than any of our other picks here, so be prepared to invest the time into him. Anyways, this was Unsung with Gimli. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. I'll see you guys in the next video.